12,000 adults hurt or neglected each year in the state of Virginia, and most of them are elderly. But if you want to know where it's happening, you're out of luck. In tonight's 10 News investigation, anchor Jenna ZIBTON is taking concerns to leaders and lawmakers in Virginia to find out what changes need to be made to protect your loved ones.
Do you think the system that we have in Virginia right now is broken?
Rather than saying it's broken, I think probably it's been outgrown, and we probably need to do some renovation to it, if not a whole overhaul.
It is clear that the system is under a lot of stress, and that the COVID pandemic really exacerbated that, and it's clear where the holes are for sure. For me, we have a lot more work to do.
Republican Chris Head and Democrat Sam Rasool agree on one thing: a need for change in Virginia's nursing home system, and they're not the only ones.
As a field, we're so far back, and we really need to move forward.
At least 1 in 10 older adults in a community setting experienced some form of abuse in the prior year, according to the National Center on Elder Abuse's Deputy Director, Eden Ruiz Lopez.
With the growing aging population, we're concerned that the problem is only going to get worse before it gets better.
She says knowledge about elder abuse lags about 2 decades behind child abuse and domestic violence. That means policies and laws are behind too, according to Lori Smetanka, the executive director for the National Consumer Voice for Quality Long-Term Care.
There have been a lot of systemic problems in the long-term care industry and the nursing home industry.
And that's led 10 News to bring these issues to lawmakers.
Seniors are so vulnerable. They really, truly are. And the senior adult population still comes from an era that is much more trusting.
Delegate Head says he introduced legislation in the General Assembly last year to start an elder abuse registry.
If someone is being negligent, then they need to be held accountable. You've got a child abuse registry. You've also got a sexual offender registry. The framework should already be there. We need to have an adult abuse registry.
But says his bills failed because of money. The fiscal impact statement cited the costs at more than $1 million, including website updates and more staff to handle appeals.
We need to figure this out now and fund our priorities.
Delegate Rasool has a background in geriatric health care and says more needs to be done.
That's, I think, a pretty easy way to have some kind of approach where people understand where this abuse is happening, and to ensure that we are helping to protect some of our older Virginians.
But experts say the registry is only one piece of what needs to change.
We need to hold the administration accountable, the owners accountable. We need to think about it more big picture. What's been going on in that facility that led to that neglect? Because you can't just pin it on the staff. There are administrative and systemic issues, like if the staff don't have the resources and supports that they need.
Is there a staffing minimum that people are held to through Medicare and Medicaid?
No, not at the federal level, and that's the problem. The requirement in nursing homes is just for sufficient staff. That's a very loose term, and it's hard to define it.
And it's not just the federal level. 10 News has learned Virginia has no minimum requirement for staffing either, only to meet the assessed needs of all residents. Compare that to Vermont, that has specific guidelines for staffing at 3 hours per day, and Arkansas, that has ratios for days, evenings, and nights. Smetanka says without more specific requirements, it leaves a lot of room for interpretation.
What we know in this industry also is if it's not required, they're not going to do it.
To me, this is a priority. And in Virginia, having worked in nursing homes, seeing what happens when we do not have proper staffing, I think that we need to make it a priority in moving forward.
We're moving along at such a breakneck speed with the growth of the senior population that we should have gotten in front of this long ago.
Virginia is in the middle of a study commissioned by the General Assembly looking at current laws and what needs to change to help prevent and remedy abuse, neglect, and exploitation of the elderly. We are tracking that closely and we'll bring you the results. Jenna ZIBTON, 10 News, working for you.
If you have questions about how to advocate for your loved one in a nursing home, you can see our previous reports on WSLS.com that include who you can contact if you think something needs to be investigated.